Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, this is the Property Podcast, and it's a grim episode. It's a dark day. Rob and I have to review our predictions from this year. Wow, some interesting listening coming up.
Welcome to the Property Podcast. This is where we take time out from advising a multi-million pound property fund, which you can learn about at portfolio.co.uk, and putting together hundreds of transactions every year for our clients, and share with you what we supposedly have learned from doing so. But if we're sounding a little bit less chirpy than usual today, it's because we've already recorded the bulk of this episode and we know what's coming up. So this is not going to make our personal top episodes of the year list, but you will definitely want to stick around.
So it's time for our news story of the week, or should I say news stories, but they are both related around the same subject, which is mortgages. And an interesting article, first off, from The Guardian. The headline reads, "Hunt to urge banks to aid mortgage borrowers amid the cost of living crisis." And this sees Jeremy Hunt, the Chancellor, urging banks to allow consumers or mortgage borrowers to transfer their mortgages to an interest-only rate, which could make a significant difference to those borrowers. Interest only, if you don't know, is in the name. It means you are only paying off the interest of your mortgage for each and every payment. Whereas you normally would have a repayment mortgage where you pay some of the capital off and the interest. So if this happens, it would mean anybody who takes advantage of it would be paying a lot less each month towards their mortgage.
Yes, this is interesting. We've spoken in past weeks about suggestions from elsewhere to support homeowners. So like the Lib Dems wanted to actually give grants to people whose mortgages have gone up by a certain amount. In other countries, we're seeing various forms of mortgage support. This isn't going that far, but it is a step in that direction, in that it's showing a clear desire from the government to prevent people from defaulting on their mortgages. Obviously, they don't want people to default on their mortgages because that's really bad news for those individuals. But large numbers of people defaulting and being repossessed are also what tends to cause massive declines in house prices. So you could also look at this as a government measure to try to keep the housing market up, which is something else that we know that they're keen on doing. The other story that we're getting into today is about the Mortgage Works, the biggest buy-to-let lender, which has reduced its stress test for lower rate taxpayers. So the stress test is an amount that you need to bring in rent in order to borrow a certain amount of money. So it's to make sure that you can afford your repayments. And as well as the general rate of interest on mortgages being pushed right up from sort of about September onwards, when everything kicked off and went a bit weird, all the lenders also increased their stress tests. And those lenders have now been bringing them back down again. So we've spoken in recent weeks about other lenders doing this. The fact that the Mortgage Works are doing it is significant because they are the biggest, and other lenders often look to them to see where the market's going and to determine their own policies. So far, they've only loosened it for lower rate taxpayers. But hopefully that's a sign that there's more on the way for everyone else soon, which will really help when it comes to getting the type of mortgage you want at the rate that you want and being able to borrow the amount you want. We said that we saw the situation improving. We have seen the situation improving both in terms of rate and stress tests over the last month or so. And stories like this means that trend is likely to continue into next year.
As it's coming up to Christmas, Rob and I are feeling extra generous, and we are kicking off the new year in style on the Property Podcast, because we're going to put out a mini-series on the podcast starting January 1st to kick off your property year in style. If you've been struggling to get going or not push on as much as you've wanted to, then this mini-series has you covered. So have your alarm set for January 1st. No hangovers, anybody. Let's make next year a big one, and the Property Podcast is going to be there to help you every step of the way. Make sure you take advantage of that mini-series in the new year. So welcome to our worst podcast experience of the year. Yes, each and every year, Rob and I, for some reason, punish ourselves. So most property commentators will make predictions, and they will report them to the press or wherever they like to report them, and that's it. Nobody will check up on them. They certainly don't promote what they've said themselves, maybe if they've got it right, but those comments normally will go into the internet oblivion and never be talked about again. But for some reason, Rob and I make ourselves accountable to our predictions that we make at the beginning of each year and review them to tens of thousands of people on the Property Podcast each and every year. And no matter what the results, we turn up, we talk about what we said and look at the results and look at how wrong and occasionally how right we got it. So we're going to be reviewing what we said back in January. It's been an absolutely turbulent, crazy year again. let's face it, we should get used to turbulent and crazy over the last few years. That's all we've had. And property prices have been all over the place. The markets have been all over the place. So let's get into how we've done. And we'll start, Rob, with the top areas. This is normally our strongest point. This is normally where we perform best. If you go back through the podcasts over the last few years, we've normally done quite well with predicting the best areas to invest in each and every year. How did we get on this year? Should we start with our top 5 cities? And what we've agreed to do here is both list 3 places that we feel will end up in the top 5.
I'm picking Liverpool, Manchester and Nottingham.
I've also picked Liverpool and Manchester, but instead of Nottingham, and I think Nottingham probably will end up in that list, but I've gone for Derby, so at least it's a little bit different.
Well, I suggest we talk about this at great length and hope we run out of time at some point, because I've read ahead a little bit, but this was pretty good. So I picked Liverpool, Manchester and Nottingham as the top 3. The top 3 were, in fact, Nottingham, Manchester and Birmingham. So got 2 out of 3, though. That's pretty good. We take this data from Home Track every year. Liverpool disappointing a bit this year. It's down in 9th. Rob, you also picked Liverpool and Manchester, but your third pick is Derby. Derby doesn't make it into the main Home Track index, but I've gone and pulled it out from their broader list of 65 cities, which they publish quarterly, and Derby has grown by 9% this year. So that would have been enough for 5th place, but only very narrowly. There's only 0.2% between 3rd and 5th. So I think we can be pretty happy with that.
I'm absolutely delighted, Rob. We'll be back next week with another show. No, we better carry on, because it doesn't go as well from this point on. But guys, you can take solace that at least when we talk about areas in the future, you can listen to us. Everything else, moving forward, you may not want to. Let's carry on.
Okay, so our next prediction was house prices in the UK as a whole. Here's what we said.
And I believe the UK property market will grow by around 8% this year.
6% is the number that I had. Well, Rob, we're going to take the data this year for October for no reason whatsoever. No, we can't do that, can we? We have to look at the full year's data, and we didn't get this one right.
No. So we have November's data, and it was going quite well till October, but November was one of the biggest month-on-month falls we've had for a few years. So the market is up. So I know with all the noise out there, people would think the market has collapsed. But, well, no. History will show us when we look back that the market currently is up 4.4%. And we use the same source each and every year when we do this, which is Nationwide. So Nationwide are currently reporting that the UK market is up for the 11 months so far this year at 4.4%. As you've just heard, I said 8%, and Rob, you said 6%, which you would have been right if we'd recorded this last month, because the market's just fallen 2%, but you're not, and unfortunately we're both wrong. At least you're not as wrong as me. It was a bold number, and at the halfway point of the year, it was over 8%. I was looking very smug. In fact, I was actually concerned that I'd undercooked my prediction, and I should have been bolder, because it was just charging on. Then our lovely government liked to get involved, and things changed slightly, and we are where we are today. However, and I've heard you make this point on the podcast in weeks gone by, Rob, and I think it's a very good point to make. When you look at the data in 10 years' time, and you'll just go, oh, 2022, that was a solid year, over 4%. That's what it'll look like. It feels turbulent now because you're living through it, but history will make it look like a very normal year when you look at the end number.
That's right. And this is actually the first time that we've ever been doing predictions that we've overshot. We've undershot in the past, but we've never gone over. So this is a first. I've actually got a thought about why that might be, and we'll maybe talk about that at the end when we try and draw some conclusions from this. But let's move swiftly on, because you've actually got a bright spot among the gloom coming up. We always make a prediction for London separately, because everyone's always very interested in what's happening with London house prices. So how did we say London would do? I think London will put on growth of 4% this year.
I'm going to have to take a photo of my notes to send to you, because I have also gone 4%. Boom.
There you go.
Back on top, Rob. I'm once again loving predictions. This makes me feel good. I mean, you couldn't be more right with that one. So that is pretty pleasing. Again, I think our area picks are strong, but let's see if that carries on with base rates. Yeah, we also made some predictions on base rates. Let's hear what we said would happen.
Oh, do we have to? So I'm going to say base rate under 1%. So let's say somewhere between 0.26 and 0.99 is the range of my prediction, which is quite a broad range, I know.
I've really copped out, and I've gone for the base rate will rise this year.
Is that it? Okay, so the thing that can barely be any lower is going to be higher. Got it.
Okay, well, I'm right.
I'm happy to ignore what I said. If we take the focus off me, I will give you I'm right on this one, even though it was the most pathetic prediction we've ever made on the podcast. Yes, from 0.25%, base rates did go up. Well done.
Just call me Mystic Rob.
But no, I think I obviously got this way, way, way wrong. Like, dramatically wrong. This, among stiff competition, is the most wrong I've been about anything in the history of the podcast, and it's only fair to acknowledge that because we do acknowledge when we get things right, and I got this one very wrong. The reason for me being so wrong here is it ties into inflation, so maybe we should move on and listen to our inflation prediction and then have a little discussion about that.
Okay, so I'm going to go with inflation of at least 5%.
It's my turn to send you a photo now. That's exactly what I had. I thought I was being a bit out there with my 5%, but you've gone with the same number. Okay, so we both went for 5% inflation. In fact, as of the end of October 2022, which is the latest data we've got at the time of recording, inflation at 11.1%. And Rob, that obviously is why the base rate has been hiked up as far and as fast as it has. The base rate, as you quite correctly said, was always going to go up from where it was. And I thought it could go up to nearly 1%, which would have been a big move from where it was. So the fact that it's ended up at the time of recording, and it's got one more chance to go up again before the end of the calendar year, to 3% is an absolutely gigantic move, even though 3%, obviously by historical standards, is still low. But that had to happen because inflation was so high. And for me, I think the learning that I'll be taking away from this is that the timing and the magnitude of things is so hard to predict. Like, we kind of knew that inflation was going to come back. We knew it was going to be higher. We knew that would make some difference to the base rate. But that's not helpful in itself. To actually do anything useful with the information, you need to know with some kind of accuracy when and how much. And that is virtually impossible to do. Well, it's impossible for us to do in any case.
Wait, Rob. I said at least 5%. At least 5%. So I'm having another tick here. You can play with your I'm wrong, but at least 5%. I think 11.1% is at least 5%. That is right.
It's your positivity is one of your characteristics that I admire so much, but I think even you're stretching it a little bit here. But we get used to things so quickly. Like, we're used to inflation being high now, but 11% was unimaginable at the start of the year.
We have nobody sponsoring us for a mattress or funky software, but instead, we are going to talk about our own businesses because, you know what? They're the ones we love the most anyway. And Property Hub Invest is a great service for a small group of people. If you are the type of investor who's hands-off and wants to build a portfolio but doesn't have the time or doesn't want to put the time into building that portfolio, then Property Hub Invest may be right for you. To check out if it is a good fit, go to propertyhub.net/invest. Fill in your details there, and we can have a chat to understand if we are best placed to help you build your property portfolio. Okay, so we strayed away from what's kind of meant to be our strengths and moved into some other asset classes. So let's review what we said about the FTSE 100.
So we normally talk about the FTSE 100. As we record, it stands at 7465. Where's it going to end up, Rob?
I'm going to put a percentage on it, and I believe at some point it will be 10% higher than it is now in 2022.
I'm going to go in a different direction with this, and this is pretty much just to kind of be interesting because I really don't know. There's very little insight behind this. So I'm just going to say that the FTSE is going to close 2022 lower than it is today, which is 7465.
Well, there is no spin in this, Rob. I mean, even Alistair Campbell couldn't do anything with this rubbish that I spouted. I mean, I was just way wrong.
Yeah, and I actually went less precise on this one. It was just higher or lower. I went lower, and it is a very, very, very slightly higher as of the day of recording. It's so marginal. When this is aired in a few days' time, I might be right. You never know.
Wait a minute, Rob. So I say higher than a number, and it's not a precise prediction. And you took a 50-50 on higher or lower, and now you're some footsie sage.
It's been a tough year, Rob. Come on, give us a break.
I'm going to start calling you Warren.
But it's actually been a really interesting year in the markets. And for most of the year, it has been lower. All the way through to mid-October, in fact. It was 6,800-ish. But when we had the latest change of government and the markets calmed down a bit, it's really rallied up to close to 7.5 again. Yep, so another cross in the column. Only one more to go, though.
Let's have a listen to what we said about Bitcoin.
So my twin predictions are that Bitcoin is going to fall by more than 30% during the year, that it's going to hit an all-time high during the year, and that would put it at above $69,000.
Yeah, as we make our predictions today, Bitcoin is at $46,000. Tomorrow it could be 80,000. But that's actually my prediction, is that at some point this year, it will hit $80,000. So I'm going to push that high that you've predicted a little bit higher, Rob. I hadn't written this down, but I completely agree with your 30% fall at some point as well. Not 30% from where it is now. That's not what you're saying, and I just want to make that clear. But at some point, it will fall 30% from where it goes up to. Okay, so well done. You were right. It did fall more than 30%. And actually, it fell more than 60%. So you could have been even bolder with that, but you can have a tick there, Rob. I'm way wrong. I think Bitcoin might warrant a future episode, or at least a discussion on a future episode, because Bitcoin's had, and crypto in general, has just had a shocker of a year. Like, you think property's had a bad year and it's up 4-point-something%. My word, crypto has been a disaster this year, absolute disaster. And I think there's some interesting discussions to have, because the narrative around Bitcoin was it was digital gold. And therefore, based on what happened elsewhere in the economy this year, that you'd expect it to have gone up further from where it started. And it absolutely did not. It's collapsed. So for me, that is like fascinating, that the whole belief around a certain asset class has been, well, blown apart.
Yeah, it's been a heck of a year. And it is super interesting because crypto has had an absolutely insane year. I've lost count of the number of spectacular blow-ups that there have been. Some of the biggest cryptocurrencies have just imploded, going from being worth billions to zero. Some of the biggest crypto funds, some of the biggest exchanges have imploded, including FTX, which people may not have heard about because it's not that big of a news story in like the wider kind of mainstream press. But in our kind of world, it's been huge, and it's just one of the most incredible stories ever. And none of it's actually to do with Bitcoin. It's all to do with the crypto space in general, and Bitcoin's been pulled down by that. So I think the dynamics of it are fascinating, and it may well warrant another episode, because I think there are things you can learn from that for your investments in property, even if you have no intention of touching Bitcoin itself. But for the purposes of our predictions, not very helpful. So Rob, I think the good news that we can take away from this is that we finished. We got to the end, but there's not much more beyond that. Worst year ever.
It was the worst year ever. But actually, if that's a worst year, then I'll take that, because while there was some stuff that was just way wrong, there was a lot that was right as well. It wasn't like everything was wrong in there. So yes, I am an optimist, but being right about the best areas to invest in is probably what we should care about the most, because that's what we talk about the most. I think people will forgive us for not being experts on Bitcoin or the FTSE. So overall, not a bad year on what's our supposed strengths, and a bit of a shocking year when we strayed away from our strengths.
Yeah, and I think there's a couple of points worth keeping in mind here. And one of those is, I think we've fallen victim to something that you see happen with predictions all the time, which is that turning points are really hard to call. So this year has been a major turning point in terms of inflation, the base rate, and therefore the effect that that had on trends in the housing market. But making that call to within 12 months when you're making a prediction is so hard. What most people end up doing is making some variation of projecting forward what's currently happening and maybe going up a bit, down a bit. But even if you believe that a turning point is going to happen, and it kind of inevitably going to happen, saying it's going to happen within this 12 months is super difficult. And that's a big reason, I think, why we suffered with a few of us. But Rob, I think the bigger takeaway is that despite being wrong about a whole load of stuff this year, a lot of it outside our areas of expertise, but some of it property stuff as well, does any of it change our overall thesis about investing in property? No, not for me at least. I think it's really important to remember that any kind of 12-month predictions are mostly for entertainment purposes. Hasn't turned out to be that entertaining today, but it's supposed to be.
Well, that's debatable, Rob.
Yeah,
people have probably enjoyed them.
Fair enough. I've not been entertained. Others may have been. But the point of investing is for the long term. The magic of investing in property, in any asset really, is doing so for the long term and letting time work its magic. You shouldn't be looking at what's going to happen in the next 12 months and using that to decide how positive or negative you feel about any asset class.
Okay, so normally we finish off with a hub extra, but we really did do ourselves proud last week. We've given you our very best resources of the year in last week's episode. a bit of absolute cracker. I really, really enjoyed this episode. So if you've not listened to last week's episode, we give you the best books, podcasts, the lot. It is the ultimate Hub Extra. So your Hub Extra this week, if we kind of want to do a soft one, is go and listen to that episode. And if you have listened, you didn't buy some of the stuff or download some of the stuff, then go back, have a listen and get your hands on some of those items. They could be good Christmas gift ideas as well. Another gift to you is the podcast will, of course, be back next Thursday. No breaks here. Every single week of the year, we will deliver you a podcast without question. So make sure you join us on Thursday for that. And while Ask Rob and Rob is taking a break over Christmas, if you need a bit more property goodness in your life, head over to our YouTube channel where we've been banging out loads of content over there. Search for Property Hub UK in YouTube and subscribe to start watching. So until next Thursday, take care, have fun, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.